We'll now build a character movie clip symbol using vectors created in Adobe Illustrator and imported through CC libraries. The first thing we'll do is to create a new layer for our character by clicking the New Layer button, double-clicking on the layer name, and typing in character. With that layer selected, let's open up our CC libraries panel. And notice here that we have this happy apple piece of vector art created in Adobe Illustrator. Note that this library object is made available to you through the link to save project files at the beginning of this tutorial. So I'm going to select this, click and drag, and drop this on our stage. We can select the artboard. If we want the layers to be converted to bitmap or not, I'm going to keep them all as vector. We don't have any text, so we don't have to worry about text conversion. And we're going to convert our layers to a single animate layer. Let's go ahead and hit OK. And we can now reposition this down on the stage like that. You can see here that even though I placed everything in one specific layer, that it's still composed of multiple pieces of vector artwork, multiple shapes. This will allow us to easily animate these shapes as we create a character movement loop. You'll also notice down here that because this was imported, it renamed our character layer to the identifier through CC libraries. Let's go ahead and rename that once again to character. What we want to do now is to create a movie clip symbol out of all of these shapes. So with my selection tool, I'm going to click and drag a selection rectangle around all the different shapes that we just imported. To create any kind of symbol in Animate CC, we choose Modify, Convert to Symbol. Here we're able to give the symbol a name, so I will call this character, and we can assign it a specific type. What we're going to use here is a movie clip symbol, and the reason we're doing this is because we actually want this to be a looping animation. His walk cycle, or rather skateboarding cycle, is going to loop independent of our main timeline. Let's hit OK. And we can see that he's now surrounded by this blue outline. And with him selected, you'll notice in the properties panel that this indicates we have a movie clip symbol instance here. An important thing to note is that any movie clip symbols that we have on the stage like this are actually symbol instances, whereas the symbol itself resides up here within the document library. So we can see this character symbol right here is the actual raw symbol. What we have on our stage right here is actually an instance of that symbol. This means that we can change the properties, such as position and scale, of this instance on the stage, and it won't affect the actual symbol. However, if we double-click on an instance, just like this, anything we do now within our character symbol will affect every instance of that character that we are using. In this particular animation, we only have one instance of this symbol, so we don't have to worry too much about it. What we'll do now is to create some additional movie clips out of the different pieces we want to animate. So for instance, let's use the selection tool to click anywhere off of the apple. And now once again, we are dealing with the actual Canvas document here. However, if I click on the apple's body, we can see that this is a drawing object. And I can even click on multiples. And the way you do that is hold down the Shift key on your keyboard and click additional items. So you can tell right here that we want to select his body, his face, the stem, and the leaf. With all of those selected, we can choose Modify, once again, Convert to Symbol. This time we'll simply call this Body, and make sure it's a movie clip symbol, and hit OK. We'll now do the same thing to his various extremities. So let's choose his left arm here, Modify, Convert to Symbol, L arm. We'll do the same for the right arm, Modify, Convert to Symbol, and for the right leg. And for the left leg, we'll want to choose the leg, but in addition, we need to choose all of these pieces too of the skateboard, and there's actually quite a few pieces here. It probably makes more sense to just use a selection rectangle. So using the selection tool, simply click and drag a selection rectangle which goes around the entire skateboard, and it's okay if it just touches his foot. You don't need to select the entire leg. Because this is a shape, it will be selected. With all of these objects selected, we can choose Modify, Convert to Symbol. Now you'll notice here that some of the legs and arms appear to be problematic. They're appearing above the character. We can see this, where this piece really should be behind, this should be behind the apple body, and so forth. What we need to do is deal with the actual visual stacking order of these different objects. Additionally, if we're going to animate these individually, inside of Animate CC, it's best to place every object to be animated on its own specific layer. So let's go ahead and use our selection tool again to drag a selection rectangle around every one of those movie clip symbol instances that we just created. With these selected, we can go up to Modify, Timeline, and choose this option right here, Distribute to Layers. Notice layer 1, which previously had all of our objects on it, is now empty. We can tell it's empty because this keyframe right here indicates an unfilled circle. So selecting that layer, we can delete it with this little trash can icon here because we don't need it anymore. You'll notice that similar to other applications like Adobe Photoshop, we have our layers and they have a specific visual stacking order. So for instance, we want the left arm and the left leg to be behind the body. So let's drag the body layer by clicking and dragging. And we drag that up to the middle. But notice now that the right arm doesn't appear in the right place, and neither does the left leg. So let's grab the left leg, drag it below the body, and we'll grab the right arm and drag that above the body. So anything at the top of the layer order is going to appear above other elements visually on our stage. Additionally, since we distributed to layers, and the objects that we distributed were named movie clip symbols, each one of the layers is named automatically to represent the symbol that's on that layer. Pretty convenient. Let's go ahead and choose File, Save, and we're ready to move on. Let's now focus on internal character animation through motion and shape tweens to design an animated movement cycle. The first thing we need to do for any sort of motion inside Animate CC is to extend our frames. Right now, we only have one frame in our timeline, and this is actually a playhead indicator right here, this red line and red box, showing us the current frame of the playhead. Since we only have one frame right now, no animation is possible. Let's go ahead and click and drag across all of these frames at frame 12, spanning every one of these layers. You can tell they're selected because they're highlighted in this orange-yellow color here. We'll go ahead and choose Insert, Timeline, Frame. As soon as we do that, you'll notice that we have all of these gray frames going up to frame 12, and we're actually able to scrub the playhead. Down at the bottom here, we can even see which particular frame we're at. So, for instance, this is frame 8, and we go all the way to frame 12. The next thing we'll want to do is just make a selection that's very similar to what we just did, but this time across all these active frames. It doesn't matter how many of these frames in each layer that we select, just that we have them all selected. What we're going to do is apply a motion tween to each of these layers. So to do that, choose Insert, Motion Tween. Notice as soon as I do that, a number of things happen visually to the timeline and the different layers. For one thing, all of the different layers, since they have a motion tween applied, now show up as this blue color. In addition, the icon for each layer changes to indicate that we're using a motion tween. You will have noticed by now that on frame 1, we have this filled circle. This indicates that there's content on each of these layers, and it's also an indicator of a keyframe. The initial frame is always going to be a keyframe. A keyframe differs from all of these other frames in that a keyframe specifies a set of properties for the object. In the case of frame 1, it's the simple default properties that we already have. However, if I change the properties in an additional keyframe, what that will do is actually change the different properties across time and potentially cause motion across those other frames between the keyframes. So what we want to make sure of before we do any sort of animation, since this is a looping animation cycle for our character, we want frame 1 and frame 12 to have the exact same properties. To do that, let's simply click and drag again across frame 12 on every one of these layers. Go up to Insert, Timeline, Keyframe. Now if we scrub back a little bit, you'll notice that instead of the type of keyframe we have on frame 1, which is indicated by a filled circle, on frame 12, we actually have a keyframe that is a small black diamond. This indicates a change in properties. What we've basically done here, though, is simply replicate the properties on frame 1. What this allows us to do is go over to frame 6 and make our adjustments to the different properties of each movie clip symbol instance, causing animation from frame 1 to 6 and from frame 6 to 12. So let's go ahead and do that right now. The first thing we'll want to do is select the body, both arms, and this leg right here, the right leg. He's going to need to sort of pump, so his entire body is going to shift downward for that. You'll notice down below that we now have a keyframe that was automatically created on frame 6 for each one of the layers that's affected. Our left leg was not selected, it was not moved, therefore a keyframe does not appear on that layer. For the remainder of our animation, let's choose our free transform tool, and we can just click anywhere on the stage to disable those selections. And what we'll want to do is start off with our right leg. You'll notice this white circle here. This is the transform point. And any transforms that we do to the leg are going to revolve around this point. what we'll be doing is actually rotating the leg, and we don't want it to rotate from the center. We want it to rotate from the hip. So all we need to do is click and drag to move that transform point onto the apple's hip. Then as I hover over any of the corners, my cursor changes into a rotation indicator. All I need to do is click and drag, and you can see that we rotate around the transform point, which is now at his hip. Let's go ahead and select the right arm, and once again, move that transform point to his shoulder. Hovering near any of the corners will produce the rotation icon, which allows us to click and drag to do a little bit of rotation. We'll do the same exact thing to his left arm. And if we want to preview this, all we need to do is drag our playhead. The last thing I'll do is select the left leg and simply shift it over a little bit with my arrow keys. Just the slightest amount. There we go. It just adds a bit more realism to the character movement. So at this point, the movement cycle is generally complete. However, he does have this leaf up here, which is kind of like hair, and you would think that it would be flapping in the breeze as he moves forward. So let's go ahead and choose our selection tool again. And choosing the body, double-click to enter the body movie clip symbol within our character symbol on the main stage. What we'll want to do is deselect everything else by simply clicking on the stage anywhere, and then choosing, with the selection tool, this one particular shape. Going up top, we'll hit Edit, and we want to cut. That removes the shape from our stage altogether. Let's lock down layer 1, create a new layer, and name that layer Leaf. Let's also go ahead and rename layer 1 to Body. Choosing our leaf layer, once again go Edit. Instead of simply pasting, we're going to paste in place. It's going to paste it at the same exact coordinates that we cut it from. Now, the body movie clip symbol here only has one frame as well, so we can't have any animation yet. However, if we go and add some additional frames by selecting frame 6 across both the body and the leaf layer, and choosing Insert, Timeline, Frame, that's going to allow us to move the playhead across those frames. Since this is a shape, we can actually use what's known as a shape tween here. And doing that, it allows us to do some basic animation to the shape without having to turn it into a movie clip symbol. So selecting anywhere on this span of frames, we can go up to Insert and choose Shape Tween. You'll notice that Shape Tween looks a bit different than Motion Tween did. For one thing, it's got a green background. And additionally, what we see here with this dot pattern is a broken tween. Nothing's going to animate right now, because with a shape tween, you need to insert explicit keyframes. Unlike a motion tween, where you can just tweak the properties on the stage and keyframes are inserted for you. So let's go ahead and choose frame 3, Insert, Timeline, Keyframe, and we'll choose frame 6 as well. Insert, Timeline, Keyframe. You'll notice we now have these little arrows instead of the broken line. However, the properties across these keyframes are all the same, so we have no motion yet. Let's go ahead and choose our leaf on frame 3 here. And using, once again, the free transform tool, let's move our transform point over to the corner, and we'll shift that up a little bit. If you find it difficult to take control of the transform point on this small leaf object, I suggest you zoom in a bit, and then zoom back out when you're done. You can see that automatically we have this little waving motion here, which looks just perfect. Let's go back out to scene 1 by clicking on scene 1 up here. And at this point, we can once again choose File, Save, before moving on with our project.